All right. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. G. This is MJ. Got Dr. G here. On the other side, Dr. Philip Goscienski. And thank you for joining us tonight. This is All Things Crunchy, another episode. And thank you, Dr. G, for joining me again. Had you on a ton of my shows, and I always appreciate your time and love having you on. And this is going to be a great topic tonight. I'm really excited to learn more about how to read our labels on our food. Most of our food hopefully will come without labels, but if we do happen to come across food that has the nutrition facts, then we're going to learn more about how to decipher what's on those packages tonight. So before we get into the show, and with you, Dr. G, I'm going to tell everybody who's watching us live tonight, if you do have a question and you're watching us through YouTube, just go ahead and comment, and I should get the comment or question right to my phone. And if you're watching through Google, then you can just type in a question, and I will check the question and answer portion of the chat tonight. And also, if you're watching on Google, you should see there showcased my YouTube channel, but as well Dr. G's website, stoneagedoc.com, has tons of information. So go over there and check him out. And again, that's watching through Google. You can check out his website right from Google, but YouTube, it just shows the video, so you don't see that little showcase. So, Dr. G, anything going on with you around town? I know that you have do you have a talk coming up September 16th? No.
Yeah, I've got one coming up at the San Diego Archaeological Center.
Yes, okay. So now, is this open to the public?
Yes, it is. If you go to their website, just if you Google SDAC, that'll be near the top of the list, and it lists that program on their website.
Okay, awesome. And tell me the topic again.
It's going to be Diseases of the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Which will include the 10 plagues of Egypt, which is just a fascinating story.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's
amazing.
That sounds like it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I when I saw your email come across, I was a little bummed because I have a show actually that night. But it sounds like a fascinating topic. So if you all out there that are watching us live are available September 16th to go see Dr. G. Where is it at, Dr. G?
The San Diego Archaeological Center.
Okay.
And that is just a little bit to the east of the Wild Animal Park on Highway 78.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about a mile past the main gate. Check on the date. I don't have my planner in front of me. I think it's the 16th or the following week. I'm not sure.
I think I remember the email saying the 16th, but if you all have any interest in going to see Dr. G talk, please let me know. allthingscrunchy@gmail.com. You can email me or get to me any way that you can through social media. And what's that?
It's a Saturday.
Oh, then it's not the 16th. Then maybe it's the 17th. Maybe it's my birthday.
The 24th.
Oh, then never mind. 24th. Oh, I'm going away that weekend. That's why I couldn't go. I knew I couldn't go. Okay, awesome. Well, let's get talking on our topic tonight. And once again, if you are watching us live and you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type in through Google, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can just comment. Or if you have any comments, that's fine too, and I would love to read them. So Dr. G, we are talking about the nutrition facts tonight, and we've got your PowerPoint as we usually do, and I will be running this. So I'm going to let you take it away, and I will be advancing your PowerPoint for you.
Okay, well, thanks, MJ. It's always a pleasure to be here and talking about some of my favorite things. And the nutrition labels are part of that. And the reason for that title, Nutrition Facts, period, really, question mark, is because they can be very misleading if they're not read with a little bit of insight. And so why don't we go to the first slide there about who reads labels.
Okay.
And I was surprised to find out it varies by country, because if we look at the UK, it's about 30% of them who always read labels, and about 20% of UK shoppers rarely or never read them. On the other hand, the statistics that I have seen here, which kind of blew me away, was that 7% of Americans read labels when they're shopping. And that's higher than figures that I've seen in the past, so I kind of wonder where that information came from. But what I found interesting was one study which showed that label reading is inversely proportional to body weight. In other words, the more people read labels, the less likely they are to be overweight. It's the people who ignore reading labels that are more likely to have the obesity or be overweight. But one thing I wanted also to mention is that there are new labels on the way. They have just been revised this year, and we'll be talking about them in a little while. So for the next few minutes, I want to talk about the current labels, which is what we'll be seeing for the next couple of years.
Okay.
And this one is an example. This shows the various nutrition facts, and there's something that you should notice about one item, which is the fat that's listed on this label. The total fat is listed as 12 grams. Saturated fat is 3 grams. Trans fat is 1.5 grams, which is at the high end of trans fat. Mm-hmm. And then he asks, so what's missing? Because if you add 3 plus 1.5, that doesn't add up to 12. So we're missing 7.5 grams of fat. And so we're hoping that that's going to be polyunsaturated fat or healthy fats, but that is not what you can necessarily assume from reading the labels. Now, when we look at what the FDA requires, this example, for instance, it lists only the mandated components of the food product, and this is why they don't list all the fats, because it's only saturated fat and trans fat that are labeled. Another thing to consider is that all of the labels are rounded off, and so if we look at this slide, we look at things like carbohydrate and calories and fat, protein, sodium, and fiber, and these are really the important things to be concerned about. One of the things that the new labeling commission made a big point of was daily value. But the question is, does anyone really pay attention to daily value? Because if you look at this slide, this label, it does show the daily value, but I'm not sure that the readers can even see it. The people who watch this can even see it because of the fact that the print is so small.
Yeah.
And if we look at daily value and what it really means, it's based on an intake of either 2,000 calories a day or 25 calories a day, and it shows the percentage for total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium as an example, and it gives those as the upper limits. And the take-home message from this is twofold. Number one, that those numbers are the upper limits for those things. You shouldn't have more than that amount. The other thing is that the average American eats more than 2,500 calories a day. That most people eat actually over 3,000 calories a day. If we look at the value for dietary fiber, for instance, I'm going to, why don't we advance it down to the bottom there?
Okay.
The daily value for fiber is the lower limit, and everybody should have more than that. The daily
there we go.
is not nearly as useful as simply knowing what the absolute amounts are, and we should be taking something in excess of about 40 grams a day of fiber, as an example. And most people don't even get that. The average American takes in about 15 grams a day, which is only 1/10 as much fiber as people ate during the Stone Age, and with a profound effect on people's health. So here's some of the things that we should be concerned about. And we should be concerned about serving size and the kinds of fat that are present and the kinds of sugar and the amounts of sugar that are present. And when you come right down to it, if we only consider those three things, we'll pretty much be on track for having a healthy diet. Because if you watch those things, you will probably also be aware of some of the other things to be careful of, like sodium as an example, or saturated fat. Mm-hmm. Now let's compare, for instance, serving sizes for between 1957 and 1997 for these products: Coca-Cola, a bagel, a muffin, a fast food hamburger, movie popcorn, and a candy bar.
Okay.
And so if we see what the actual numbers are, we find that Coca-Cola has gone from 8 ounces in a serving to 32 ounces. Now that's only half as much as a big gulp. And we see a lot of people walking around with those things.
Yeah.
We're looking at bagels, which have now mushroomed in size from 2 ounces to 6 ounces. A muffin, get this, the average muffin has gone from 1.5 ounces to a half pound.
Oh my gosh.
Fast food hamburgers used to be about 2 ounces for one of those patties. Now the average is 6 ounces, and there are, of course, many chains that serve double hamburgers. This one really is something I take with a grain of salt, pardon the pun, and that's movie popcorn.
Yeah.
It used to be that the average movie popcorn serving was 3 cups. Now it's 16 cups. But when I look at some of the enormous tubs that people bring into theaters, and sometimes they'll bring 2 of them, I really wonder whether 16 ounces really reflects what people are eating these days. The Hershey
and
bar,
it's not organic, so it's all genetically modified corn. Just
with a lot of butter and a lot of salt.
Yeah.
The Hershey bar has gone from 2 ounces to 7 ounces. And I do want to point out that even though these are not what we call official serving sizes, they pretty much reflect what the trend has been. We can look at official serving sizes on this slide, and a hamburger official serving size is about 3.5 ounces, about 100 grams, which is how it's listed in most diet references. Coca-Cola is now 8 ounces. That's the official serving size. Pizza is 1 slice. Can you believe that? I mean, how many times have you gone out for pizza and have only eaten 1 slice? Hardly anybody does that.
Yeah, no.
The official serving size of the average candy bar is 1/3 of a bar, but nobody eats 1/3 of a bar. I mean, if you're going to buy a candy bar, you're probably going to eat the whole thing. And there are a few surprises in this whole issue of serving sizes. One question, for instance, is how many Oreo cookies are there in one serving? And do you know, Mary MJ?
Oh gosh, it's been a long time, but I would say maybe 2.
Well, that's pretty good. Actually, it's 3. If you keep it to 2,
Oh.
you're doing well. And there are some references that really do say 2, but the official is 3, according to the package. But again, how many people who eat Oreos will only eat 3, and certainly 2?
No way.
Right. And then we look at a bag of potato chips, for instance. Again, one of the small bags. Well, how many servings do you get in those? Well, often those small bags have 1.5 or 2 servings, but nobody eats only half a bag of potato chips. We're likely to scarf down the entire thing. When we look at some diet foods, one of the reasons they can be legally listed as diet is because they only have half the calories, because they only have half the serving. But because of that, most people are going to be satisfied with half the serving, so they'll eat the whole thing. It's no longer a diet food.
Right.
If you look at something like the kind of pretzels you get from a vending machine, that's 2.5 servings. But come on, nobody has only 1 serving out of a bag of pretzels and leaves the rest of it.
Right.
Some soft drinks, for instance, that consist of 2 servings. And one of the problems that we get into is that the label tends to list the calories not for the entire container, but only for a serving. And I'll give you a little preview. That's one of the changes that we're going to see in the new labeling process.
Okay. So, okay. Interesting. Okay. So they're going to change the so they're really just going to change the sizes, or?
Well, they're going to change the what they call serving sizes. And they'll, I'll point this out later, but there'll be 2 side-by-side labels so that one is the official serving size and the other is what people usually consider to be a serving.
Oh.
And they are not the same. So we're knuckling under to what the American people want.
Okay,
now,
okay.
Let's look at some of the things that what the label does not tell you. I've already pointed out the matter of fats, that on that FDA-approved label, 7.5 grams of fat are missing.
Right.
When it comes to carbohydrates, what they don't point out is the glycemic index and the glycemic load. Now granted, glycemic index, which is what a number that gives you a rough estimate of the degree to which a given food raises your blood sugar and how fast it does that, is the glycemic index, which can vary all over the place with a given food, depending on how it's prepared, etc. But it's somewhat useful if you stick to low glycemic index foods. What they don't tell you also is the glycemic load, because, for instance, like parsnips have a very high glycemic index because they convert to sugar so rapidly in your bloodstream, but they have a very low glycemic load because nobody eats a pound of parsnips. And so the numbers can be somewhat misleading.
Okay. Dr. G, I have a question from one of our viewers, if you don't mind, and it's about the new labeling system. So Anna asks, any idea if the new labeling system will explicitly state the source of food starch? I try to avoid gluten, and it's a real pain to see this general term in the ingredient list.
No, but I will address that when I talk about the new labeling system, because some manufacturers will list gluten and some won't. And some will have a disclaimer saying this product is made on the same machinery that is used for gluten-containing food. So that's a whole other issue, which we'll get to.
Okay.
If we look at the fats, for instance, what we find is that polyunsaturated fats which are really important in our diet, are not usually listed. We don't get enough omega-3s, which suppress inflammation. We get too much in the way of omega-6s, which promote inflammation, and yet those, as well as monounsaturated fats, are not listed. And monounsaturated fats are what we find in olive oil, which is the best example, and also in avocados. And yet those are not listed. Now, another fat problem is trans fats. Trans fats, I think we discussed this in one of the earlier sessions, they must be labeled, and they had to be labeled by law back in 2006. However, trans fats are being eliminated from food processing in the United States. And in about another, about another 2 years, in the middle of 2018, what we're going to see is that trans fats will be virtually left off most food products. Now, there's another aspect of this food label, and that is what I call the other label. And what this is the list of ingredients. And this is, to me, the most important part of the labeling process, not the one that we just discussed. Because by law, ingredients have to be listed by weight. The challenge is that there are some misleading identifiers, and examples are flour and sugar. So that if you don't have a little insight into what kind of flour is listed and what kinds of sugars are listed, then you may not be getting the most nutrition for the buck. For instance, if we look at flour, you have to ask yourself whether it's wheat flour or refined flour, whole wheat flour, or whole grain flour. And if it says simply wheat flour or refined flour, that's typically the white flour that is present in about 80% of our baked goods. If something says whole wheat flour or whole grain flour as the first ingredient, that's usually the best choice. Now, when it comes to sugars, we have what I refer to as sugar aliases, and I've listed 16 of them here. And all of these are sugar. They are somewhat different in their chemistry. One of the things that people worry about a lot is fructose. And fructose by itself is not harmful in small amounts. It's the amount of fructose that we take in overall that's the problem. Now, in the middle of that list, we see the third one down on the left is glucose. In the middle is dextrose. The government, in its wisdom, allows manufacturers to list those separately, but they are chemically identical. There is no difference between glucose and dextrose. Glucose is dextrose. And yet they allow this to be labeled differently because if they listed all these sugars together, in many foods, they would be the #1 ingredient. And people would be less likely to buy them if they saw that the first ingredient was sugar.
Oh, man.
Now, in addition to that, there are what I refer to as code words. And code words include things like light, which may be spelled L-I-T-E. Things like reduced fat, less fat, fat-free, low fat, low sodium, less sodium. These often have no real meaning unless you know what the actual numbers are. Look at the very bottom, there's something there that says good source. Well, what does that mean? Doesn't mean anything to the consumer. If we look at the word more, that's something that's used in advertising. Just by itself, the word more has no meaning whatsoever. Now, there are some other code words, and they include things like organic or organically grown, raised without antibiotics, no hormones administered. Now, there are some categories of food, like chicken, for instance, where they are not allowed to use hormones at all, and yet they'll put no hormones on the label, making you think they're doing something positive when they're doing something that the law requires. Things like natural or multi-grain may or may not have meaning, because if you have something like a 7-grain bread, for instance, it may contain 7 different kinds of grain, but all in very small amounts, and the largest grain is simply refined flour. Again, doesn't really tell you anything about the nutritional value of that product. Free range, of course, we've talked about in the past. Free range animal is simply a chicken that's allowed to get out of the coop at some time during the day. Even the time that's not specified is considered free range. Well, when we look at terms like fortified, enriched, they may or may not be fortified with something that really makes a difference. When they say no artificial ingredients, that usually refers to things that should be organic, but not necessarily. Trans-free is one that really is something that can be abused. Zero trans fat by government edict does not mean zero. It means less than 1/2 gram of trans fat, but even smaller amounts are still harmful, so that until things change about 2 years from now, the zero trans fat label is going to persist. There are some terms that they use that are really questionable. When they look at, say, new and improved, well, new and improved from what? Excellent source, again, very vague terms. Lower in calories, they might have just made the serving sizes smaller, that's why they're lower. More fiber, if you go from 10 grams of fiber a day to 15 grams of fiber, that's more, doesn't really make very much of a difference. Words like healthier can be applied in a variety of ways. So may help reduce the risk of some disease. Again, that's because the FDA does not allow manufacturers to claim that any product actually eliminates or cures a disease, but they can say may help to reduce risk, like with omega-3s, for instance, may help to reduce the risk of sudden cardiac arrest, which is a valid claim, but again, it depends on how much omega-3 fats you have there. Terms supports and promotes and maintains, they may be useful, but again, you really should learn a little more about the product instead of simply accepting what's said on the label. Now, one issue that is a real challenge is this issue of organic, because theoretically, organic is something that applies to fresh food, which uses no synthetic fertilizers or pesticides or antibiotics or hormones, that does not use genetically modified organisms, and the best organics are the ones that are locally grown, because if you have something grown organic and it has to travel for several days or several hundred miles, it's not going to look very good just because it is organic.
Right.
So when we look at the term organic for processed food, what we see is that it only contains organic ingredients or a specified percentage of organic, and there are no artificial food additives in that processed food. Now, it should also be processed without any artificial methods or materials, for instance, no chemical ripening and no radiation. However, if we look at the definitions for organic, this is really confusing, and I have to have these definitions in front of me all the time for me to remember what's what. The official term 100% organic means that it has all organically produced ingredients, and this carries the seal of the USDA. If something has 95% or more organic ingredients, in other words, 5% that are not organic, it also carries a USDA organic seal, and it's called USDA certified organic. Then there is a category made with organic ingredients. And that means that even though it has no seal, it's composed of 75 to 90% of organic ingredients. Again, that's better than something that's not listed as organic at all, but 10 to 25% of non-organic material is still something that some people just would not want.
Yeah.
And if a food is listed as simply organic, it simply means that less than 70% has organic content, which can be all over the place. And again, for people who are really interested in having truly organic food, the term organic loses value very quickly if it doesn't have that USDA sign.
Yeah, you really have to have that seal. You have to look for it,
That's
or
right.
otherwise it's not it. So.
That's right. And the problem is even the USDA makes the point that no distinction should be made between organically and non-organically produced products in terms of quality, appearance, or safety. And that means that just because your product has the seal, you can't make claims about the value of that in terms of its quality or safety. When we look at the quality of organic, what we find is that there really isn't an awful lot of research, and there has been a slight increase in vitamin C content among organically grown leafy vegetables and potatoes, but this doesn't apply to everything across the board. There is a trend among organic foods toward lower protein, but that protein is of higher quality. In other words, it has a more complete amino acid profile. So I think that's a pretty acceptable trade-off. What we find is that when studies are done on animals, it shows that organic foods are better in terms of helping them to grow better and to maintain health. But the studies in humans simply are not very definitive. There are no good studies of organic in humans because virtually nobody has an all-organic diet. It's really difficult to do that unless South America or Africa. When it comes to the safety of organic foods, there was an interesting article back in 1997 from Consumer Reports, and they said traces of pesticides were found in 77% of conventional foods, but also 25% of organically labeled foods. And that number of 23 to 25% has been maintained over the years. One of the reasons for that is that some chemicals can persist in the soil for decades. And so even if a farmer switches to organic methods, there is still some chemical that can come up to the soil. And one of the issues that came up with one study that Consumer Reports did, they said there was at least one sample from every one of the groups that they studied that actually exceeded federal safety standards. So I have come up with my organic philosophy.
Okay.
And it is local products are generally better than distant produce, whether they're organic or not, because a local farmer doesn't have to treat his products the same way in order to maintain freshness. Certified organic is better, but not by a whole lot. And one of the things that we find is that there are some advantages to organic, but they tend to be small, more likely to be cumulative over a person's life. But again, we vary so much in our intake of organic versus non-organic. It's virtually impossible to determine how effective that is. And certainly one of the things that I have maintained is that if there are large differences in the cost between organic and non-organic, you have to think twice before you'll pay more for that product. And so the bottom line in all this is that a little bit of chemical contamination is better than not having any fruits and vegetables. And one of the things about chemicals and their toxicity is that the workers in the fields who apply these chemicals do have an increased risk of cancer, but it's not a large increase. And by the time produce gets to us, most of those chemicals have either broken down or have been removed, so that the risk to us of the chemicals like pesticides probably exaggerated in some areas. And again, it's best to at least have some fruits and vegetables and not to avoid things because you're worried about pesticides.
So then would you say, Dr. G, that the going with like the dirty dozen type thing, it would be the best way to go if you are kind of steering more towards organic but worried about the costs, that basically, you know, that these the dirty dozen are the ones that you should stick with, or are you just kind of saying buy?
Yeah, what do you mean by dirty dozen?
Well, there's a list out there of fruits and vegetables that you should buy organic and ones that you're okay with getting by that if it's not organic that you should be okay. So I think that like avocados would be one of those, and to me it's understandable. Avocado has a skin around it so that if it's frayed, that's not exactly getting into what you're eating.
Right.
As opposed to like a peach where you're eating the outside where the skin is, I would want to buy that organic so that
peaches are one of the worst when it comes to persistence of chemicals. Mm-hmm. I would also certainly feel that raspberries and strawberries are better if they are organic, only because because of the crevices. It would be harder to get rid of the chemicals. On the other hand, one of the things that raspberries and strawberries have in common is that they're more likely to be contaminated with organisms that can cause disease. So if we can avoid the pesticides but wash them thoroughly, you're a little better off. But of course, when you wash things like raspberries, you better eat them quickly because they're not going to last very long once they
Okay.
Right. Now, there are some good reasons for reading labels, and one of those is what I call avoiding stealth calories. And if you read labels carefully, you may find that what you think is a serving is really 2 servings or 2.5 servings, and you're getting 2 or 2.5 times as many calories as you think you are because you're eating the whole container.
Right.
And so what this does is it helps to solve the serving size issue. That's one of the things we should read carefully. Another is something I mentioned earlier, that's having the right flour. Mm-hmm. When you see enriched flour or refined flour as the first ingredient, that almost always indicates simply bleached flour, which has the least nutrients in it.
Okay.
When we look at fat calories, we have to consider the difference between calories and fat and the quality of fat. Because olive oil, for instance, which is very high in monounsaturated, is the healthiest kind of fat that we can get, bar none, except for maybe fish oil. But certainly olive oil, which is a very prominent ingredient in the true Mediterranean diet, like 40% of their calories, is associated with a number of health benefits, whereas the average intake in this country of saturated fat is about 30%, which is not associated with good health.
Yeah.
Now, something also that comes up, I put that in here because I expected that people might have a question about, and that's expiration dates.
Yeah.
And those are days sell by, used by, best if used by. However, those refer not to how soon something will become contaminated or spoiled. it tells you the last date at which you can expect the maximum flavor and nutritional benefit from these.
Okay.
Because some things will last a whole lot longer than those dates before they actually turn rotten. And remember that these are only numbers. These are estimates that are put forth by the manufacturer or the producer. And they, like any number, like the numbers that we use for calories, they're very artificial. They're rounded off, and they only give you a general idea of those dates.
Okay.
So let's move on to the new labels. Now, the new labels, number one, are notable because it's the first time they have been totally revised in about 20 years.
Oh, wow.
They don't take effect, however, for another 2 years, not until July of 2018. Now, for those food manufacturers that sell less than a certain amount of product, I think it's 5 million or 10 million a year, I'm not sure. They have even more time to comply with those label changes. But the big question is it going to make any difference in this juggernaut that we are facing of obesity and diabetes? I think any difference is going to be so small, it's going to be hard to measure. And what I mean by that is that some people will pay more attention. These are people who are probably already paying attention to what's on the food label. And the numbers of people with obesity and type 2 diabetes continue to climb. There was some suggestion that in children, obesity is beginning to level off. That may be true. I hate to think that this is going to be only a temporary plateau, but I'm afraid that's what it will be. I think we're still headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to serving sizes that are listed on the new labels, they do recognize that current labels, serving sizes, are simply unrealistic. And what is new about these labels is that they're going to reflect what people actually eat. And so what's going to happen is that there's going to be less guilt, but more fat. And one of the objections to this new system is that people are going to say, well, if the old serving sizes were too small, the new serving sizes are official and they're okay. It's okay for me to eat more. And so I think this is going to actually hinder the process of reining in obesity and type 2 diabetes. But it'll take years before we really know what the effect is going to be. What we're looking at is food, for instance, that might have 1.5 servings. That's going to be listed as 1 serving because most people will not limit themselves and leave a half a serving in the package. And what we're also going to see is what they call side-by-side labels, in which one of those labels will indicate the serving size and in terms of calories and amounts, and the other label will indicate the calories in the entire package. So that if people are going to eat the entire package of chips or cookies or Oreos, they will know exactly what they're getting and they won't be misled by this concept of serving size.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to trans fats, trans fats will still be part of the new label. And as far as the government is concerned, that 0.49 grams still is equal to 0, which tells you a lot about the way our country is administered. However, those labels will be eliminated in 2018, and the actual amount of trans fats will probably be listed. I don't know how they're going to implement this. My concern is that the lobbyists for food producers are probably going to ask for a number of exceptions, and they probably will get them. However, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that in Europe, for instance, where they have been eliminating trans fats for decades, they have not seen that it has lowered the volume of foods that contain trans fats the manufacturers claim that they can't have the same texture and the same taste as foods with trans fat. Turns out that it's not a big issue, and I think we'll find out that we will accommodate the new labeling without any problems.
Okay.
Now, some of the benefits that are likely from the new labels is that they are going to include added sugars, because there are natural sugars that are present in a given food and there are sugars that are added. And now we'll be able to see how many grams of sugar have been added to that product, and hopefully that will make people a little more careful about what they pick.
Yeah.
The big things that the USDA is touting is that the calorie number will be much more obvious. The print size, the font size, will be about 3 times as great, maybe more. They think it's going to make a difference. I don't think it's going to make a difference to people who don't read labels, or the people who do read labels, because the people who don't read them are not going to see the increased size of the font. The people who do read them, they're going to see it anyway. So it's not going to make a difference. One of the new things that they're going to list, vitamin D, and one of the reasons for that is, as you probably know, more than half of our population is deficient in vitamin D, and that even includes children and adolescents. So this is something that probably is one of the benefits of the new labels. We'll continue to list calcium. Calcium is one of those ingredients that's important for strong bones, but as I've mentioned several times in the past, calcium is not the only thing that we need for strong bones. There are at least 10 other nutrients that are important to prevent osteoporosis as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the things on the new label that are not likely to matter? Well, I really don't think that the daily value changes are going to affect very many people. It does not reflect the average calorie intake, as I mentioned earlier, and so it doesn't have as much value as making a more realistic daily value comparison. If they were to compare 2,000 a day to 2,500 to 3,000, that might make more sense. But the average person in this country eats more than 2,000 calories a day. Something that surprised me a little bit was this one, that's potassium. Now, it's true that most people don't get as much potassium as they need. Most of our potassium, however, should come from fruits and vegetables, so it really shouldn't come from processed foods. And if you look at some of the labels, the potassium content may be as little as 30 or 50 or 100 milligrams of potassium, whereas our potassium intake should be a couple of thousand milligrams a day and not a couple of hundred. So I'm not sure that adding potassium to the label is going to make very much of a difference whatever.
Yeah.
Finally, when it comes to the issue of serving size, I have a feeling that most people are simply going to ignore that, and they're going to continue with their usual habits. The difference will be the small number of people who are already reading labels, and they'll notice things that they may not have noticed before, and that will affect their eating habits.
Okay.
And MJ, that's the whole spiel.
That's it. Oh, there's your little cute thing at the end, though. How cute.
Yeah, one of my favorite little add-ons. She's getting her fruit, getting her antioxidants, getting her vitamin C. And a really cute look on her face.
Yes. Oh, what a little cutie. Okay. Yeah, I always love your end pictures. I was like, wait, there's one more slide. I know that there's one. Cool. Well, that was awesome. And there's so many things that got hit on that I definitely, I'd always had questions of, but it's just one of those things where I am one of those people that does read labels, and when I'm looking at it, and then you kind of just decide like, too much, like put it down, or, if you really want it, okay, then, go with it. But most of the stuff, you just don't know exactly what you're reading there. And I find it, I mean, it's not funny, of course, that they would try and split up sugars as much as they would, just so they don't have to put it all in one area.
Right.
So, and very interesting. Well, thank you, Dr. G. I, of course, always love hanging out with you, and thank you for educating us tonight on this topic.
Good. It's a fun topic.
Yeah, definitely. And what's that?
It's good being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And check out Dr. G. We have the date wrong. It's the 24th. It's a Saturday. And you're going to be talking about diseases of the Bible, right?
Right. Fascinating stuff.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, we are all finished here, so we're going to sign off, and I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks for another All Things Crunchy. My next episode is going to be on Montessori. Interesting topic from before having baby, newborn, infant, all sorts of, all the way up until the kids are out and leave the nest. But we're going to talk about that not next week, but the week after. So thank you, Dr. G, again.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time, and we will see you guys in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.